Welcome back to the RPC podcast. Glad to have you here. I'm Redirected. You can call me Matt. Today we have two great RPC contributors with us. Osmium Zulu, you know him from his post, Lifting is Not a Suggestion, and Praxology, and you know him from his post, My Struggle with SSA. Thanks for joining us, guys. Let's get to it.
All right. Yeah, that post was very moving. You were very vulnerable. It was it was surprising.
Yeah, I really think you're going to help a lot of people with that one, Prax.
I know. I wrote it with you in mind, so it just...
Always willing to lend a hand, right? Wait.
Thank you.
Gotta help a brother out.
So this first topic we're going to talk about came up with our last podcast with Horns of Apathy. If you don't know who Horns of Apathy is, he's an MRP moderator and doesn't make any bones about how he feels about Christianity, Christians. Listen to the podcast. What he talks about is virgins, specifically Christian women, and how women that are virgins are worse than women that are not virgins because they can be more neurotic. They grew up in a household, supported that, and that household somehow messed up.
Really, when it comes down to it, I think there's a big question as to why. Why is she a virgin? Like, for example, if she is a virgin because she is so spurgtastic or otherwise repressed and so fearful of her own sexuality that she is going to be a completely frigid basket case of a person. And I've known some people like this. They're nice ladies in many cases, but I don't envy their husbands. And the worst case of it was a woman who, she and her husband, after getting married, in the first 4 months of marriage, I think had sex once. She didn't really like it, pretty much just cut him off at that point because she felt dirty because of it. That's a pretty awful outcome. If that's the background, then I would not be pleased with that situation. Now you could make the argument of, okay, what was this guy doing to, lead his wife to improve his situation? I don't know the guy well, so I can't really speak to that. But just knowing her a little bit was enough to see that you can fix up just about any house or any clunker car, to use a poor analogy here, but you're starting from a really hard spot when that thing's been on fire before. And you're going to have a lot more of a hill to climb, so to speak. So I think that the reasons why can be important. Now, on the other hand, if this girl came from a good, stable family, she had other women in her life who walked that road and had positive experiences with it. They weren't shrewish. They were otherwise very, accommodating and forthcoming about what sex was about. And it wasn't a shame thing, but like hey, this is a gift you can give your husband kind of thing. I think that could work out really well. It's not my experience, so I can't speak to it much more than that. I think there's this attitude that exists in RPC and in other Christian circles that, well, virgin is automatically better. I have a hard time with that concept because I have seen guys in pretty miserable marriages who really sought after that, who probably would have been happier if they had been less strict about that, because it kind of forced them into a pretty narrow market, digging under rocks that probably shouldn't have been overturned.
Did you marry a virgin?
She wasn't a virgin. She didn't have a high end count, and I feel pretty confident about knowing the details of that, but I'm also not hung up about it because that was 8 years ago that we got married. It's kind of an interesting thing. I think a lot of guys are really hung up on the end count thing and the past sexual history thing because they're actually just really cowardly and fearful and self-doubting about their ability to be their wife's best. I had none of those doubts or inhibitions or hangups. I knew that I was going to be her absolute best in every category. It didn't really bother me in the same way that I think it bothers a lot of guys, and that's proven to be the case. So
dude, you're gonna blow up some incels' brains with this kind of talk. A lot of the young guys only want to marry a virgin.
Yeah, well, these young guys have barely talked to a woman, so they also don't know what the hell they're dealing with or talking about. And the idea that, okay, from an incel standpoint, it kind of makes sense, right? They're already struggling to attract a woman, and so they already have major confidence issues to begin with. So are they going to have the confidence when they do find this girl who maybe has an end count of 2, or that he's going to completely outcompete and blow these other 2 guys out of the water, and she's not going to be some alpha widow? Well, if he has that confidence, he's probably not an incel.
So this is perfect. We have Prax here. Prax, can you give us an incel's insight on this?
Dude, you're it's my birthday today. You're
Bullying for birthdays?
Being an incel, if I were to put my feet into the shoes of somebody who is...
Well, you have a lot of guys that you talk to, especially on the Discord, that are very trad, young, under 25. Obviously, they're virgins still, and they want to marry a virgin. So technically, they're incels, right?
Right.
What do they think? What do you tell them?
What do I tell them is different than what do they think. What do I tell them is, personally, I've been with both. The woman that I'm married to, we didn't kiss until our wedding day, to give you kind of a contrast. And before that, my end count is pretty high. Even beyond that, the number of girls that I've fooled around with is even higher than that. I've been to both pools, and trying to get all uppity about this one thing when there's so many other pieces that could go wrong. If you're so focused on this one thing going right, you can miss all of the other red flags. It seems like a weird hill to die on.
I disagree with both of you. I married a virgin. I'll use the Bible. I'll give 3 examples. Starting with 1 Corinthians 6:18-19. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own. Second example, 1 Thessalonians 4:3-5. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust like Gentiles who do not know God. Third example, Romans 12:1-2. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. The Bible makes it clear. I mean, it even goes as far as to say sexual sin is a sin against your own body. So I want a woman that's not only a Christian, but has the convictions of what she reads in the Bible, that she doesn't want to have sexual sin against her own body.
I think there's still a different case when you're looking at, okay, so there's a girl who didn't grow up Christian. She got to college, went to a college ministry, and ended up getting saved there. Well, while she was in high school, she slept with 2 guys. Is that a girl who had the prior understanding anyways of scripture and had any of those categories to even work with? I think that's in a different category than the pastor's daughter who decided that, yeah, this is important kind of, but hey, there's these cute guys over here on the football team. There's a different background there, and there's a different involved to that. To equivocate the two, I wouldn't say is correct. I also think there's a component of this too here where Prax was talking about, at a certain point, it's a weird hill to die on in the current circumstances that we find ourselves in. I don't know about you guys, maybe you live in much more traditional areas, but if you're at all like me, dear listener, and you happen to live in some sort of lefty hellscape, it's a pretty tough go. I've advocated and I still advocate for geographical arbitrage. If you can't find what you're looking for and you need to go somewhere else. Do it smart. Don't just go to find a girl. It should be part of your mission, etc. There are certain places where you are going to have a very hard path to go if you're going to be holding that out as a singular requirement. In my opinion, you're likely to compromise on other things because that you prize that factor so much. It's like if you really, really, really badly wanted a red car, you just love the color red and you find this car that's great. Yeah, it has these other issues, but it's red. And so you settle for that one quality. You may be overlooking some other red flags of the woman.
I just want to make sure my car is black and has a lot of trunk space.
That's even outside of the data that points to women that sleep with multiple guys lose their ability to be happy in the relationship. I don't know the exact numbers. After a certain number of partners, the divorce rate skyrockets. There's a reason for that. It's because women that sleep with multiple men lose their ability to pair bond.
I've seen those studies and it's been a long time since I've looked at them, so I'm going to kind of just shoot from the cuff here. I think that you're right in that there gets to be a certain point of, okay, this girl has gone through a lot here and she's jumping from guy to guy to guy. That's probably not a good, if the past is the best indicator of the future, those don't bode well. Those are not good positive signs of these things working out. So I agree that the idea of, hey, this girl's been with, triple digit guys. Yeah, you might want to take that as the red flag parade that it is. That's still a different category than, hey, there was this girl who got in over her head or decided to go experiment with these things a couple times in high school or college and she has an end count of like 2. I don't think that you can say those two are the same thing. And I'm not here to defend the girls who are out there breaking their convictions or whatever else, but I think that just on a purely pragmatic level, that's a different thing than saying, oh, okay, they're this triple digit end count and that's what we're talking about here. So I don't think anybody here would argue that would be a good idea, and I doubt even Horns, not to put words in his mouth, would argue that that's a good indicator of future ability to stick with a mate.
Question for both of you. What is the highest number end count you'd accept? Let's say horrible, your wife dies, you got to find a new wife. What's the number?
To give a specific number is kind of difficult because you're talking about age as a factor here too, right? Had they been previously married, obviously that factors into this as well. I would definitely say single digit in my book. The lower the better, really.
Prax, what's your number?
For me, it wouldn't even be something that would really register on my radar. I'm not personally super concerned with how many guys my potential theoretical wife would have been with. If it's manifesting in other personality traits, then maybe I'll be more inquisitive. I would almost feel bad for a girl that was showing me wishy-washy attention if I was trying to court her, because train doesn't stop, baby.
And some of this is, again, a matter of practicality, right? Like, I would love to think that we have virgins growing on trees these days, but if you look at the state of the church right now, it's a freaking wreck. Men don't have any authority in their own home, whether by design or by their own chumpishness, if you will. So it's no surprise that you have droves of young people who are out there who, one, don't even know their own faith, and two, aren't following that, because the church and the family structure are pretty well collapsed in many cases. It's not like we're just walking around back in Puritan times where that was the norm. That has a much different flavor to all of this, because at the end of the day, we were chose by God to live in these times and to make do with what we've got, not advocating for the, hey, do go do the Mark Driscoll thing and marry up those single moms, you jerk. At the end of the day, you do have to look around the church and recognize that we're dealing with a very different circumstance than what really any of our ancestors ever had to.
All right, fine. That's not my hill to die on either.
I'm going to put out a point here too, is because there is such a heavy prize that's put on that, and it still kind of begs the question why. You give some reasons, and I'm not going to argue the moral component of it. We're still looking at a different animal than when the Bible was written. If you have to know paternity so that your inheritance of your family that's been in the family line for generations is going to go to someone who's actually your kid, that is a much bigger deal than from an economic standpoint and from a civil law standpoint than we have to do and deal with now. There's a different gravity of actual consequence of that behavior then versus what we see now. Yeah, I'm not going to argue the moral component of it, but from an actual pragmatic, how can it affect you negatively? It doesn't have the same punch that it would have back in the day if you had married a girl who was prone to sleeping around and suddenly you're raising some other Chad's kid and he gets all the inheritance that your ancestors worked hard for.
If you have to be pragmatic and marry a girl that slept with one or two guys, as long as she's Christian.
And I don't want to dissuade the guys out there who are like, that's my hill to die on. You know what? If that's your thing, man, have at it, but make sure that you're bringing the kind of value that's going to require, because you're not just looking for unicorns here. You're looking for unicorns that are, translucent. You're looking for some really rare specimen, and that's fine. If that's your deal, that's what you're called to, whatever. It's when the guys come out, like that guy who posted that topic recently, who it just came out like he was placing an order at a fast food restaurant. Yeah, these are the qualities that I want. What's the easiest way to get this? His lifts were terrible. The guy was just a complete dud when it came to what appeared to be his attractiveness. For that guy to be wanting to die on that hill, okay, dude, good luck, but you're not going to get it more than likely. And if you do, you probably wouldn't know what to do with it. So, if you're going to shoot for highest value and that's what you consider high value, you had better be doing everything you can to be bringing a tremendous amount of value along the way. Because if that girl is holding on to that conviction, not because she's weird, but because she actually holds that conviction and is holding out for a high quality guy, you bet she's going to be looking out for a very high quality guy. So you better be ready to bring that to the table.
The next topic is very near and dear to my heart, and it's about martial arts, something that I've practiced for the last 5 or so years. I know you have the post, lifting is not a suggestion, but if I were to say doing martial arts is not a suggestion, is that something you could agree with?
I would, but I'd be a hypocrite. I think that it's something that most men should be engaged in, and it's something that I've not been able to do recently. And, I was looking into doing it, and then COVID all happened, and gyms pretty much shut down everywhere. There's one that I found recently. There's a guy who I recently got connected with and could probably start doing it, and now it's just a matter of working it into the schedule. But it's on my to-do list, and certainly as I have a son now and I want him to be able to grow up with the discipline that comes from that and all the skills that come along with it and the health benefits along with that, I want to lead the way on that. So I think men should be doing that. Absolutely.
I've been thinking about this one a lot. Just like your lifting is not a suggestion post has a bunch of bullet points on what's good, I've got some for martial arts. The biggest one for me, and this is something said by Justin Gaethje, is if one man can hold you down, 2 men can rape you. You got to be able to defend yourself. You got to be able to keep you and your family safe. That's the amount of confidence I have from knowing that probably 98% of men would lose to me in a fight. It goes a long way, not just in confidence in my looks, confidence in my cardio, confidence in many aspects of my life I get from doing martial arts. I do boxing. I've done jiu-jitsu in the past, but I'm more of a boxer than anything. The second biggest one is you learn how to control your inner coward. So when you get punched in the head, you just want to leave, get out of the ring, take off your gloves, go home and sleep and just get away from the scary. You have to learn to control that part of you. It sucks. I don't know if you ever really do master it, but I think I have more of a control of it now than I did in the beginning. You learn to increase your cardio. So, I mean, you're going to lift weights. You have that giant body. Are you going to be able to carry it around? Are you going to get tired going upstairs because you have 50 pounds of muscle? The last one is you learn to control your adrenaline. When you get scared, when someone comes up to you and they're going to rob you, does your adrenaline spike and you do the fight, flight, or freeze? Or do you have a plan that you can execute on? The more you box, the more you get in the ring, the more you get those spikes of adrenaline, the better you are at managing it. So if you don't do martial arts, do martial arts. Find someone that does private one-on-one right now. Tell them you'll pay them $40 for half an hour just to teach you how to box, teach you how to roll, teach you anything. It goes so far. Your money goes so far with martial arts.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute and say I agree with most of those benefits. And I think that, like I said before, men should be getting involved in whether it's martial arts or something equivalent. And I think there might be some equivalents out there, but that's kind of beside the point. When it comes to you should be able to defend yourself and defend your family, is not a firearm and being proficient with that the kind of shortcut to that, if you will, and potentially more effective?
That's a good question. Not every situation warrants killing somebody. Sometimes you just need to get wrist control, take them to the ground, put your knee on their back, and wait for the police arrive. In that situation, if you had a gun, sure, you might have had to shoot that crazy person that was running at you, and you would have been justified, but wouldn't you have been better off knowing a little bit of jujitsu, taking that guy to the ground and just subduing him for 5 minutes?
I think that if you are in a situation where shooting someone would be warranted, I would be pretty reluctant to go hands-on if possible. You know, it's the whole knife thing. If you go through any kind of shooting school, they talk about basically a knife being absolutely terrible and somebody closing the distance very quickly, and you will probably lose that if you just have a firearm and you don't take the shot early. And if it's really not at that level and you're able to subdue the assailant with martial arts, I question whether or not a firearm would be warranted in that situation. Anyways,
so what if shooting isn't warranted?
Standpoint, you might be spending a long time behind bars. Then you're probably not in a situation where you're going to die.
So you're going to let someone beat you up or take your wallet or
no, if somebody's beating you up, then the firearm is warranted. I mean, if you look at the case law around it, it's pretty concrete in most places, even in a stupid state like I'm at. If somebody's punching your face or getting to the point where they're threatening you and charging you and they're within a certain distance, you're justified in most cases. The idea that martial arts is like this is how I defend myself thing, I will grant it totally can be a great skill and it can totally be the thing that you need in that circumstance. I'm not trying to down on that. Certain places you can't parry firearms, for example, and that would be a great place to be able to defend yourself in that condition. So I'm not trying to downgrade that. What I'm actually trying to say here too, though, is if guys don't have some means of defending themselves, whether you're not yet into martial arts or whatever, I would say that that's kind of the shortcut and very important thing to maybe get started with is the firearms thing, because there's definitely skill involved, there's definitely training involved, but the on-ramp to getting to a proficient level is much lower and much quicker than it is to be proficient in martial arts.
Start with jiu-jitsu, you go to boxing, and then you take up firearms training. And that's a guy that I'm scared of that knows how to do all three of those things. I don't want to be on his bad side.
Sure, I just wouldn't do it in that order necessarily. Guy comes up to you, he recently married, he has a kid on the way, and he goes, man, I am just really concerned about being able to protect my family. I live in a rough neighborhood. What should I do? Do you tell him, okay, go learn how to box first? Or do you say, you should probably go purchase a firearm?
I've already told Prax to purchase a firearm, so
yeah,
obviously I'd go with that one.
Well, there you go.
But you got a 15-year-old kid that's getting beat up
at
high school. I'm going to tell him, let's go to the mat. You're going to learn some jiu-jitsu.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that really there's the benefits that come with martial arts. The self-defense part of it, in my opinion, is the smaller part of the whole. I think that the rest of the attributes that you talked about is probably the lion's share of the benefits. And I think one of those things is being able to be in a generally male environment and actually having to contend with men on a physical basis, which is something that you almost never have to do. High school, me and my buddies wrestled all the time, and most of my buddies were older and stronger than me, and a lot of the time, they were the ones pinning me to the ground, but that forced me to learn how to contend with that sort of strength. Most guys these days, especially young guys, have never had a larger man hold them down and put them to the ground and pin them, and that feeling of complete dread and helplessness is a feeling you never want to have again, and it's very motivating.
I need to get a gun. Pretty much that's my final point.
Oz, what would you recommend for Praxis first going to be? What caliber, what model, what brand?
Caliber would be anything that you can actually find on the shelves these days for anything that's not completely eye-gouging prices. And then for what gun, just go with the Glock. At the end of the day, they're stupid proof. They work, they're reliable. Their resale value is great if you decide to go on something else. People like to get fancy with that. I have other guns that I like, but you can't go wrong with the Glock. If you're, wanting to conceal it during the summer, maybe go with the 19. It's a little easier, but yeah, you're not going to go wrong with either of those.
This question is another one that we picked up from the podcast with Horns of Apathy. He gave us the advice to ban everyone we can. And the reason he said that is in MRP specifically, they have too many people. They just can't give out the amount of advice. They can't kick enough butts. They can't do enough for all these guys. So you get a lot of guys coming in and just becoming LARPers. Do you think we would benefit from a MRP style ban model where if you say a she statement, you're gone for a month? You're not your own mental point of origin. You might be gone too. Who knows?
For our listeners who don't know, define a she statement.
Say in my OAS, I'm talking about a fitness test I got. If I go, well, I said this, and then she said this, that's a she statement. You're coming from her frame, from her point of view.
So to answer the question as far as would RPC benefit from that, there's a couple thoughts that stand out to me to begin with. The first being, to be able to enforce that model, you need to have first enough moderator attention on the sub to be able to do that, which I don't know if we have right now. I mean, we're all full-time guys. We're, in our normal jobs, we have families, we're busy. The MRP team is, as well as I understand, but I think they have a bigger mod team if I remember, and we would have to make sure that we actually had the means of enforcing it regularly. Haphazard enforcement doesn't change the culture of a sub very quickly or improve it very rapidly or reliably. Second would be, I would have to be convinced that there were a cohesive enough amount of a cohesive number of points that we can all agree as a mod team that these are the kind of hills to die on, things where we're going to be kicking people. I wouldn't say that our mods are necessarily at odds with each other. In most cases, that's not the case at all. However, Christianity is a very sectarian thing, and whether that's good or bad is a totally different conversation, but the reality is it just is. And so there's a lot of different theological perspectives, and even when it comes to pragmatic approaches to things, there are different emphases and different approaches that certain mods have, certain contributors have, that are going to influence certain directions of things. And so we'd have to be very aware of what we're trying to cultivate specifically. I'm a fan of the idea of small but intentional, because I've just never believed that the mega church model works for all the same reasons, because you start watering down the message. And I think that at the end of the day, if you don't have walls and barriers and a cost of entry to a certain point, people aren't going to invest themselves in something like that, because they need to know that they had to clear a hurdle, especially men. Any group that you can join without any kind of ask of you is probably not a group worth joining.
All right, Prax. Similar question for you. You're doing a discipleship program at your house. You call it Disciple House. I do it with you. You bring men into your home, and you want to disciple them, or you want them to become disciplers. How do you manage those men? How do you moderate Disciple House?
I have a relative view of the guys that I'm interacting with, on whether it's through Discord or whether it's the guys that are in my real life that I'm inviting. I have a fairly keen sense of who they are, whether it's through talking to them on a voice chat or video chatting with them and seeing them. You can get a pretty good sense for if there's any weird mental things going on in their head. Unless somebody is a real keen sociopath or psychopath, I can pretty well suss that out before they're coming.
What about if they're just not going to be worth discipling?
So that's a part of Disciple House that I'm fleshing out more and more thoroughly. But a big aspect that is going to be changing is that there's going to be now a requirement that whether you're coming as a disciple or whether you're coming as the teacher, that you're coming as a pair. That's one of the key things that I'm trying to focus on, is that it's a space for you and someone else to make a microcosmic weekend, basically, where in that microcosm with somebody else and showing them, oh, hey, we're going out in somewhere where there's just a bunch of people. There's going to be some Christians here. There's a lot of secular people here. There's some people we don't even know. How do we interact with these people in an appropriate way? I don't want it to come off like Christian camp where, all right, everybody wakes up at 9 and we're going to have Bible study time. Well, no, if a discipler is a real discipler, I'm not going to put parameters on what's important for them. So if they say to the person they're teaching, hey, we're waking up tomorrow at 8 and doing Bible study, then okay, that's what you're doing.
Any man that I want to disciple, any man that I want in my community, I want to know he can hold his shield in the phalanx. And the easiest way to see that is by giving him fitness tests. You test him, you're mean to him, you kick him, you don't give him any love, you make him wait on your porch for 3 days with no food or encouragement. And if he's still there, he's going to be solid. He's going to be someone that you can count on in the future. Any man can go to any church and get blue pill Christianity any day of the week. There's no reason for us to be just an extension of that. They can go to Christian Marriage if they want that. Why are they coming to us? I think it's because they want to get kicked, even if they don't know that subconsciously they want to get kicked in the butt.
Male spaces have been on the decline, and I would say it's been an orchestrated effort to reduce the number of male spaces that exist in the world, especially in the Western world. And so where you used to have like literal men's clubs, YMCA, you'd have the Boy Scouts of America, whatever, there were these places and spaces that as a man you can, throughout the course of your life, go and operate and belong, and those are gone by and large. I think men are truly craving that, and the reality is men just interact differently with one another naturally. If you have an all-guy space, there's naturally a different temperature of conversation, and then you add one woman into that situation, and it does change the temperature of that conversation, and it changes the overall flow of that social dynamic. Having any sort of male space where guys can get together and with just the ability to be guys without intrusion, you're going to start naturally, I think, seeing guys test one another and build one another up in these kind of like seemingly underhanded ways, and this kind of testing that happens. And so I think that just by the creation of these male spaces with a little intentionality, there's a lot to be recovered. And if you go to like most churches today, this is what the male space that you have. Maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, you have some retreat where guys can get together and be told that they're terrible and that they need to lead their families better, but actually serve their wives more. And then you go back into the normal milieu of things, and that's kind of it. Or maybe you have a coffee group or something that you all get together and read a few verses. And what did you think about that? It's not a real male space of any kind of value. I think that that's one of the things that, as much as we can cultivate craft and somehow provide for men, and I think in a lot of ways RPC does that, even though we do allow women posters, it's not like we go around and like gender check everyone or anything like that. I think generally speaking, though, that has been an aid.
Where do you get your male companionship from? Do you have a male space?
Yeah, I have a shooting group with a bunch of guys. We get together monthly just about, and we'll hang out and literally shoot the shit. And yeah, it's fun. It's a good time. And then throughout the week and throughout the rest of our lives, there's a few buddies that I work out with pretty regularly. Just having those intentional interactions have been really good.
Prax, where are you getting your male companionship?
Ooh, my male companionship. Good question. Disciple Cord on Discord, obviously. I have a handful of friends, whether talking with you throughout the day or talking to a few friends IRL that I chat with, that I work through and just kind of process a lot of RP terms and topics without using the term necessarily. Like, I don't use red pill terms, but I talk about the concept with them and see where it lies. And we'll like look at scripture and see where, do I agree with this? Do I disagree with this? Where does it line up, basically? But as for male spaces, most of that is still periodically infiltrated by, I might like invite my wife to something, and to what Oz is saying, you can definitely tell I'll withhold my tongue, or one of my friends will, as is right to do. I mean, you don't want to lack the social je ne sais quoi at the same time, like it does dampen conversation. So
yeah, dudes, leave your wife at home. Nobody wants to hang out with your wife. She's not on the market. We can't talk to her and flirt with her. She's just basically a little accoutrement that you bring with you, and it makes you be a good boy. So leave her at home next time.
Coming from the guy who thinks that all women are boring. So there you go.
Okay. Mental point of origin. This is kind of a hard question because it's kind of hard to define exactly what mental point of origin is. It's a lot like frame. To a lot of people, it means one thing. To some people, it means something else. As we know it, mental point of origin for Christians, what do you think it should be? And if you think it's God, why? If you think it's supposed to be yourself, same question.
This one, the Christian answer is supposed to be, well, it's God, it's the Bible. But the reality is you have a mind that God gave you to look at those things and interpret those things. And even if you pull the Catholic card and say, oh, well, I just follow what the church says. Well, you've decided, you've found it reasonable. You've made a determination of your own mind that you're going to follow what the church says. So even still, you're still relying on a degree of your own understanding in that case. And so I think that at the end of the day, Christians can't escape you have your own mind and you have your own thoughts you are going to have to be accountable for thing by just saying like, oh, well, God's my mental point of origin. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you are deciding things independently of the revealed truth of scripture and nature and the rest of it. I mean, at the end of the day, you should be very concerned about what is true, but you're still going to have to filter that through your own brain, and you're going to have to arrive at your own conclusions. And on Judgment Day, you can't then say, oh, well, Oz said blank, or, I read in this, passage of the Bible that I misunderstood, and that's why I did what I did. It's not an excuse. You still have to make your own determinations. Now, this is coming from a Calvinist, mind you, so I really would be interested in the Arminians out there who think otherwise. What's your justification for that? For the theoretical Arminian out there listening who hasn't already cast me into the fires of hell for being a Calvinist, I think you guys have this problem worse in many ways.
So, Prax, I'm going to give you the harder question. Can you define what mental point of origin is?
I was actually talking about this today with one of my friends, and I'll first start off by saying there's two primary prerequisites to being your own mental point of origin. The first is that you are your own emotional reference point. You are feeling something because you feel it rather than people are trying to make you feel a certain way. An example of this would be if I came home and my wife is really grumpy and is trying to put me in a bad mood, but I want to be in a good mood, so I'm going to be in a good mood. Or because I don't deem that the environment necessitates me being angry or being sad or whatever, I'm going to choose what mood I'm in. So that's the first point. The second point is that I am my own moral point of reference. If I'm saying something is good or bad, then I'm the one who's saying that. If I think a weight set is worth $100, then it's, to me, it's worth $100, even if my wife says it's only worth $90 or she thinks it's worth 110. What I say it is what it's worth to me. I'm not going to take her, not to say that I'm not taking her opinion into consideration, but it's, if she is saying it and my opinion is changing, it's because she provided me with information that I didn't previously have, and I'm now changing my own mind rather than her changing my mind.
So I'm going to piss a bunch of people off and jump in here for a second, because it made me think of this as a concept of outsourcing your own intelligence, outsourcing your own decision making. If you are doing that, you are not your own mental point of origin. And I see this happening writ large in society these days. And the perfect example of that is like this COVID nonsense. And if you don't think it's nonsense in terms of the completely ridiculous overreach that the government has done, and you think that, oh, well, the experts say, as soon as you say the experts say, you are outsourcing your own decision making and your own intelligence. Now, maybe you've read all these studies and you are an expert, or you've consulted with experts enough to be able to say, well, then based on my own reasoning, I agree with them. That's a totally different thing. But the reality is most people are not doing that. And so they're outsourcing their opinions because they're cowards and they're afraid of making their own decisions and facing the consequences of their own decisions. That is the epitome of not being your own mental point of origin.
Those are my two primary prerequisites to mental point of origin. A mental point of origin is extreme conscious self-advocacy towards your mission. That's point one. Point two is that you take responsibility for both the successes and failures of your pursuance of your own mission.
I went ahead and pulled up the definition from The Rational Male, so let's go ahead and consult Granddaddy Rollo here. Don't agree with everything he says, but he's got some interesting takes on a lot of it. So his definition is, your mental point of origin is really your own internalized understanding about how you yourself fit into your own understanding of frame. So it's kind of a metacognitive definition anyways. And to your point, I think these things tend to be very up to the interpreter to a large degree. But nonetheless, I think that that's helpful in the sense of it's a matter of how do you see yourself fitting into your own conceptualization of frame in a large part. How do you fit into the world, essentially? I mean, the Christian shorthand for this is worldview and your place in it. And I think that a lot of Christians have very weak and scattered worldviews, and it shows when it comes to their lack of conviction in certain areas, or they're trying to hold on to two convictions that are at odds. And that tends to demonstrate a very weak frame and a weak mental point of origin, in my opinion.
Thanks everyone for listening again to this RPC podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe.